Welcome to the Lens Podcast, where we talk about current events, news, family, church, and life from a biblical worldview. We want to help people think about these things through the lens of the Bible. I'm your producer, David Wiseman, and here are your hosts, Brian and Brian.
Well, hello and welcome to the Lens Podcast. My name is Brian Hansen.
And I'm Brian Solomon. Thanks for joining us today. Hey, our format's going to be a little different. We have one topic that we want to jump in and kind of wrestle with. It's a topic that's not only affecting a certain place in the world, but it seems like it's garnered the entire world's attention, and rightfully so. Brian, there is war brewing over in Israel, and a lot of things are coming out, news reports, and we're seeing things by way of video in ways that maybe generations have not necessarily seen in real time. The ugliness of violence and war and that sort of thing. But we want to talk about that here today.
Yeah, so since the last time that we were on the podcast, a lot has happened, and so here's what we have. About a week and a half ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, everything was normal, and we wake up one morning and discover that there has been borders crossed there in Israel, that Hamas has come through, and that there's been a lot of killing going on, and not just killing. It would be, as horrendous as it is, and I don't want to make light of just killing in general, but it seems to be the atrocities and how let's just call it evil this has been, where it seems as though they've been targeting children and pregnant women, young girls. And then, of course, just going in and slaughtering people unnecessarily. So we are talking about Israel. We are talking about the Palestinians. We're talking about, most specifically, Hamas and the terrorist organizations that are going on there. And Brian, what we want to do today is not only recognize what is going on and kind of highlight it and bring it to our attention, not that you have to because it's on the news everywhere that we look, but there are some things like there are even people around the world. By the way, we see in New York City, which isn't surprising, but there are people who are out there protesting, and protesting the Israel, making a stand and coming back, and it's too harsh and things. I saw, boy, this is surreal. I saw that Germany, they're having thousands and thousands of people turn out and be in support of Hamas, to the point where the chancellor had to come out and tell the Jews, listen, we stand for Israel, but maybe it would be best if you not practice your religion right now in public. And so you can just see where this is kind of going. But I mean, that's in Germany. So this is spreading the whole notion of what is taking place there is spreading around the globe, and people are taking sides as to, the justifiability of this thing.
Yeah. And that, I think, maybe leads us into maybe a section of our conversation as it relates to the conflict over there.
Yeah.
Is Israel justified in their response up to this point, and what looks to be like a ground invasion of Gaza? Of course, they're looking at another front to the war on their northern border. Hezbollah in Lebanon has been firing rockets in on Israel, and what does that look like? And then, of course, the big pink elephant in the room, which is Iran. To what degree will they continue to finance, propagate, and prop up some of these Islamic terrorist organizations like Hamas, Hezbollah, to further bring about casualties in Israel? The hard thing, Brian, is that I think there is a distinction between Palestine the Palestinians and Hamas, even though most Palestinians would support Hamas.
Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah.
Like what makes up the group of Palestinians?
Yeah, so some of the things that I've noticed has been absent in a lot of the reporting is the history of Palestine and history of Israel. From a follower of Jesus' point of view, we have the entire Old Testament that documents God's plan and promise for the Jewish people, really starting in Genesis 12 moving forward. Genesis 12, God makes a covenant with Abraham, and he says, through you, you're going to be a blessing to many nations. And for you, I've carved out this land that you'll be able to dwell in and live in. And so for 3,500 years, the Jewish people have lived in this land known as Israel. Some call it, Palestine. We know that the Assyrian Empire came in and took off the northern 10 tribes of Israel and really sent them off into oblivion in, I believe that was 722 BC. In 586 BC, the Babylonians came in and carried off what was left of the 2 southern tribes, and yet there was always a remnant of Jewish people living in the land. Yeah. We know that because after the Babylonian captivity, the Babylonians had their place and power, and then the Persians had theirs. And we know that Nehemiah lived under the rule of a Persian king, went back to Israel, rebuilt the city walls, and then of course you push forward through Alexander the Great, and then eventually the Romans. We see in the New Testament times, Rome had a presence there in Israel, but Jews remained.
Yeah.
And so you fast forward through the up into the early days of the Middle Ages. Really, the Arabs didn't come into the land until about the 7th century as the Islamic influence or takeover of Europe and other places began to take shape. And then that set the table for the Crusades. We're obviously water skiing over a lot of history here.
Right.
And then finally, the Ottoman Empire, which fell apart pre or right around World War I, that was kind of the end, kind of the advancement of the Islamic forces and influence in that part of Europe and in other places. Now, I will say this: Jews have always been there in the land, and after World War II. And the atrocities of the Holocaust, many of the Jews began to go back to Israel. We know that in 1948, the United Nations declared Israel a nation state. I believe it was north of I forget how many nations. Was it 160 or 60 nations? Something like that. Globally said, no, Israel's a state. Now, what's interesting about all this history lesson is that while from the 7th century on up to the end of World War II, even though there had been Arabs in the land, they had pretty much just left it desolate. There was nothing actually being done there. No agriculture, no industry, no improvement to the land. At the end of World War II, the Jews came in and they started bringing agriculture back to the land. They brought in industry and factories and began to reshape the land. And many Arabs from Lebanon, from Egypt, from Iraq, Syria, Jordan, they came to the land for work. Well, we know that history tells us the day after Israel was declared a state, many of those Arab nations declared war on Israel. Israel stood firm and was able to defend itself. But during that immediate conflict, those Arabs who were living in the land were frozen into the land in the sense that Egypt, Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, they didn't let those Palestinians.
They closed the doors.
They closed the doors on them. And so I think one thing that needs to be noted here is that the Palestinians are not an ethnic group. They're a conglomeration of Arab nations. They are Arab people who have lived in the land of Palestine. The Jewish people are an ethnic group. And while there are many, many, many Arab states, there's only one Jewish state. So that begs the question, why can't Israel exist?
Yeah, well, so this is the debate for generations, going back thousands of years, and so ever since going back to Genesis chapter 12, that God declared that this would be a land for Abraham, and then we go to Moses, and because Moses wasn't allowed to enter the land, but Joshua starts to take the land. Ever since, there's been a battle for this land. Yeah. And to your point, going back several times, there's been a lot of empires that have come in for whatever reason to take it over, and they have for hundreds of years. And then it's kind of like they would revive, and then for a while, and then go into the sunset again, and then revive. But so here we are in a place of revival, and this podcast is not meant to get into end time prophecy or anything like that. But let's at least say this. We do believe that, going clear back to Genesis chapter 12, that this is a land for God's chosen people. It was the Jews. Now we know that when Jesus died, that now he died for the sins of the whole world. And so the world is in essence God's chosen now. It's not just the Jews. However, the Jews hold a very special place in the heart of God. And so let's just kind of formulate our thoughts now to this. Based on what you just said, and thanks for going down that you unpacked a whole lot there in about 5 minutes, and that was
left
interesting.
A lot out.
Yeah. But so now we have what we call the nation of Israel, and let's camp on the word nation. So they're a country. They're a nation. They're a country.
They're a recognized state.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And yes, that happened in the 40s when right after the Holocaust, and the world sentiment was, everybody was for the Jewish people, and so
not everyone.
Well, okay, yeah, but therefore, to your point, though, there was 100 and some countries that came together and said, no, this needs to be a recognized state. That would not happen today, by the way, if that vote were probably held today. But if they are a country, the question is, do they have a right to defend themselves when they have been attacked? And so there's probably a couple things that we need to touch on about, well, is war ever justified? Because there would be some even today in our culture that would say, no war, no, never war. But is war justified? And we would come and we would say, well, if war is justified, well, who justifies it? And we come back to Romans, and we see that God has established government, so it can't be Brian Hansen or Brian Solomon saying, hey, let's go to war, unless we're, the president or a king or whatever. But it has to be the government that comes and says, yes, okay, we've been attacked, for whatever reason, this is justified. And so the government says, okay, we're going to protect ourselves from forces of evil from outside of our borders, right?
Yeah.
And
well, let me step in there. So, I mean, you're putting your finger on what theologians and philosophers have begun to shape in Western society, called the just war theory. Mm-hmm. And really, that goes back to the days of Augustine and even Thomas Aquinas. In his classic book, The City of God, he began to develop and build on what Augustine, one of the early church fathers from I believe the 2nd or 3rd century, began to shape this idea of when is it appropriate to engage in war? Is it justified? Is it justifiable? And I think that within the conversation of the just war theory, there are 8 principles, or 8 components of that. We're not going to take time in this conversation to unpack them, but the very first component of just war theory is there a just cause? And so it begs the question: is there a reason for engaging in war? Such as defending a nation from an evil aggressor. Is that morally right? Well, Revelation 19:11 says this. It says, when I saw heaven open, now this is John's vision of things to come. He said, now when I saw heaven opened, and behold, a white horse, and he who sat upon it is called Faithful and True. And in righteousness he judges and wages war. We know that person who is called Faithful and True is Jesus, who is going to come back on his white horse, and he is going to wage war.
Yeah.
So this caricature of hippie Jesus with long hair and kind of holding lambs that many of us have built New Testament doctrine around, I think is not founded or well-founded in Scripture.
Yeah.
Jesus will come back and he will wage war. And if our Savior Jesus will wage war, that does open the door for us to consider, hey, are there times when a nation state is justified in defending its citizenry?
Yeah.
To which we would say,
absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So our boss, Ralph Drollinger, has drilled down on this subject. And let me just let me read through some of these things that you have just mentioned. You mentioned 8 things. What are they? And then let's say, okay, let's land the plane on this one. If this is all true, then is there a case to be made for the United States or anyone defending Israel? But just to go back here, and is war ever justified? Yes, but there has to be a just cause.
Yep.
And that's what you just said.
Yep.
Secondly, there has to be a competent authority. So it can't just be somebody rogue saying, let's go. The authority has to be competent. It has to be well-founded and authoritative.
yeah, maybe an example of that would be, hey, it would be way out of line for Antifa to declare war on China.
Yes.
Because Antifa is not a nation state. It has to come from a competent authority.
Right. The next thing is a comparative justification. So is there ever been a situation like this that has been justified in the past? Look at that and say, okay, because it was in the past for these reasons, we can see that it is again for this one. The next one is right intention. Are we doing it for the right intent? So you could, there's a lot of speculation whether the United States went into Iraq for the right intentions. That's
right.
Yeah. So that we're not saying it was right or wrong. We're just using that as an example for intent. The next one is it the last resort? Like, are there other pressures that can be put on a country to make them?
Have there been diplomatic avenues exhausted
Right.
before aggression begins?
Yeah.
And the fact of the matter is, I believe that Israel has said in the past, as soon as Hamas stops calling for the absolute elimination of all Jews everywhere, the annihilation of the Israeli state, as soon as they stop doing that and they lay down their arms, we will recognize them as their own nation state.
Yeah.
That we can have peace. The fact of the matter is that has not taken place. Hamas still calls for the absolute genocide of a recognized nation state. So we're at that last resort.
We are, and we've even seen in the past where Israel has made such accommodation to come to the peace table that it was thought that the Palestinian Authority would come and sign, but at the end of the day, they wouldn't,
Right.
because they would give away all their authority and or finances that they tended to soak up. Instead of taking care of their people, they took care of themselves. The next one is, what's the probability of success?
Yeah.
So are you going to go in knowing that you're going to be annihilated and just slaughter your own people? What's the probability of success there?
Yep.
The next one would be the proportionality of results. So because somebody, a terrorist group comes in and they kill 3 of your people, do you drop an atom bomb on
Right.
the country? That would not be proportionality. However, I think Israel has taken the stand over their history. You kill 1 of ours, we'll kill 3 of yours. And that they've tried to use that to tamper down the
For
incentive.
deterrence.
Yeah, right. And then are you doing it in the right spirit, or is it just vengeance? Like, hey, you don't like me? Okay, I'll kill you. Or you did something to my brother? Well, I'll, whatever. Are you doing this with the right spirit?
Well, and I think that there's for everyone everywhere, war is an ugly thing, and we would recognize that.
Yeah.
Well, maybe that's an overstatement. Most good-willed people would look at war and say it's an ugly thing. Others would look at war and say, no, it's a way to make money. And so there's an industry of war. And then you have others who would say, you know what, doesn't matter. I have a cause and my agenda, blah, blah, blah. Damned be the consequences. We're going to go after this. War has got to be undertaken with great reluctance, sobriety, and counsel, knowing that war is going to include death.
Yeah.
And it can't be a whimsical.
No, war is always ugly. There's no doubt about that. The fact of war taking place. There's death. There's bodies are maimed. It's all, no matter what, it is ugly. So let's ask this question: If war is justified at times under these parameters that Ralph Drollinger has laid out, that we've just used his points here, is there a case to be made for defending Israel in this time, or in any time? But is there a case to be made for defending Israel? And we would certainly say that there is a case to be made for that, because Genesis chapter 12, verse 3 says, I will bless those who bless you. Speaking of the nation, I will bless those who bless you, and the one who curses you, I will curse. And historically, we've seen that occur. We've seen that promise fulfilled over the course of history.
And that's not to say that Israel always does everything right.
That's right.
The Old Testament is filled with instances where the nation state of Israel got it wrong.
Yeah.
So that doesn't mean that they're always. However, there is a sense in which biblical Christians need to take the side of Israel, particularly in this conflict.
Yeah.
And if Israel makes a misstep here, I think its allies need to come next to Israel, rein her in some when those missteps occur, or if those missteps occur. But as it stands right now, I believe that it's entirely appropriate for Christians everywhere to stand on the side of Israel.
Yeah, and if you want to do a follow-up reading with this, again, Ralph Drollinger, the president of Capital Ministries and founder, he has written a whole Bible study on this, and you can find it on our website. If you just look at our Bible studies and type in the biblical case for defending Israel, that'll give you a good first step insight and do a little research just to help to start to formulate your thoughts on this.
That's right.
And I think it'll be really beneficial to you.
Hey, Brian, let's shift gears and land the plane where we usually land the plane. And it's unrelated to the topic that we've talked about. It's kind of our catch-all segment called, what do we call this here? We call this What in the World? What in the World?
What in the world? Brian, what in the world is going on with you? I know that you're having some success in your family this year, aren't you?
Being a dad is great. Being a dad means that you're a part-time leader, but you kind of have to lead covertly. And you're a full-time taxi cab driver and a full-time pack mule. You just got to carry stuff from point A to point B, right?
You're on.
So one of the things that I'm involved with my daughters this fall is I'm an assistant coach for their soccer team. I've got two daughters that are playing for the high school varsity team at Legacy Christian Academy in Xenia, Ohio, and we've had a great season. We just wrapped up the regular season. We went 15-1-1. We only lost one time, and we ended up securing the number 2 seed in the tournament seedings, and the tournament actually begins tonight.
Wow, 15-1 and 1,
15
and you got the
one.
number 2 seed.
Number
wow.
2 seed. So our only loss came to the team that ended up getting the number 1 seed in the tournament. So we hope to face them again later on in the tournament. But having the number 2 seed, our pathway looks pretty doable all the way through districts. So super pumped. One of the cool things that happened in our last game of the season, my daughter Claire, who's a freshman, she pulled out a flip throw. She's 14. She's never done it 15, and she's never done it in a game. I think we'll embed that video into our video version of our podcast. You can find that on YouTube, and you can kind of see that highlight there. Super pumped. Anytime one of our girls does something awesome. And then our oldest, Allie, she's a junior. She just, the conference awards came out yesterday, and she got second team all conference. So we're really pumped about that.
Well, congratulations on a good season, but the season isn't over, so we'll look forward to the update on that.
That's right. We're rolling.
Yeah, and so for me, we're all about gearing up. God has really blessed in our ministry, Brian. We were seeing a lot of growth, not only here in the United States with our local government ministries and things, but we're seeing it overseas as well. Mm-hmm. And so we are getting ready to head out on October the 24th. We're going to head to Seoul, South Korea, and we are launching a ministry there. And so we'll be training some of our ministry leaders there for about 4 days. And then we have the opportunity to head to Nepal, of all things, and just really looking forward to see. And not only will we be in Nepal, but we'll have ministries from 4 other countries as well as in Nepal. You know, one of the things. So you were talking about your kids and their sports prowess. So our youngest is still playing sports, although he's in college, and he plays for Ohio Northern University. And Ohio Northern University, I'm going to miss the game of games, and that is when they play Butler, of all things, where Hoosiers was filmed. And Butler's a legit team, and I'd so desperately like to be here and see how he matches up against the big boys. But anyway, it's fun. It's a fun time of life, and looking forward to it.
Yep.
Hey, this has been our talk on Israel and what's going on in the world right now. Welcome to The Lens. We're glad that you've joined us. And by the way, if you have any questions that we can answer and we can talk about, please let us know in the comments of the podcast. Thanks for joining us today. Bye now.